Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking a bit about the basics of radio control planes and their components. So I'll start off by talking about 5 components that are really essential to any radio control plane. There are lots more, but these 5 will get you in the air. The first is the battery. The battery powers the plane. We use lithium polymer batteries in general because they're high discharge, meaning they can output a lot of power really quickly, which is useful in a plane. The second component is the receiver. The receiver has 2 antennas and several outputs, and it takes input from the transmitter of the antennas and then outputs that to various components that need some kind of input to be controlled, such as the third component, the servo. So servos take input from the receiver and convert that to some actuation, which is usually used to control flaps such as ailerons on the plane. The electronic speed controller also takes input from the receiver, but uses it to control the motor, which powers the propeller of the plane and gives it thrust. So the electronic speed controller tends to take high voltage directly from the battery, but a separate signal from the receiver to power the motor, while the receiver usually tends to take low voltage from the battery, so there's usually some kind of step down between the battery and the receiver. So now that we've talked a little bit about the basic components, let's have a look at where they mount inside actual kit planes. So the first plane we can look at is this one. This is a flying wing, which means it doesn't have a tail. As you can see, the other one has a tail and it has verticals. This one only has 2 wings and fins on the end. It also only has 2 control surfaces, one on each wing, so that would mean you'd only need 2 servos to control the entire plane. And so if we open the canopy, we can see the first thing, this big black box here, is the receiver. So that takes the input from the transmitter and converts it into something that outputs to the servos and the motor. So we can see here, most of the time these are plugged in with these connectors, which have 3 pins. We have a ground in black, we have a power in red, or usually 5 volts, but it can be at any voltage, and then the white wire is usually for signal, which is any kind of signal that the radio outputs, the receiver receives, and then is forwarded onto something else which uses that signal to control the plane in some way. So for example, this wire here, in this case the signal is actually yellow and the ground is brown, I guess, but most of the time those 3 colors, or these 3 colors, represent the 3 different cables used. This actually traces back through there, and then if we flip the plane over, we can see, well, let me remove this tape here. This actually traces through here, like this, and comes down here. I'll just show you through there, and then here, through that hole, and then we come back to this side, and this is actually the servo. So we can see that the servo is mounted almost inside the wing, and that just helps with aerodynamics, because as you can see, this is pretty much flush, and the only thing that's sticking out is this control system right here. And so what this is a control rod and control horns, one on the servo here, and this allows the actual flat back here to move back and forwards when the servo is moved, as you can see, like that. And these can be made of lots of different materials. Generally, you want something strong but also lightweight, that won't flex at all. And then mounted here, these control horns you can buy pretty cheaply, and just have almost like a zip tie. There's a thing on the bottom that just mounts into them. So that's the servos. Then if we look back here again, it's much harder to see, but there's another wire with a signal that runs from here, and it runs to the belly down here. Now you can't see in here because this is closed off at the moment, but there's what's called an ESC in here that I talked about earlier, and that basically takes input from the receiver and converts it into something that the motor can read. And so from the receiver, you get a wire to the ESC, and then that routes directly to the motor here, and you can see there's 3 wires here. So the ESC takes in power and one signal and then converts it to these 3 wires that the motor takes. And you can see there's also a propeller attached here. And so one other thing of note is that there is a direct power. There is a direct. This flying wing takes 4S, which is a battery. The cell count is 4, and it takes 4 cells, which is equivalent to around 16 volts, 16.8. So the receiver in this case cannot take 16.8 volts directly. That would fry it. So what this actually routes to is this cable, which takes input from the battery, routes directly to the ESC, because the ESC needs all those 16 volts to power the motor. The motor needs 16 volts to be able to work well. And so this goes directly to the ESC, but it goes through this thing here, which is a voltage step down as well. So this goes into the voltage step down, which steps the voltage down to 5 volts, and that powers this. So generally there is one of the inputs over here can be used to take power. It varies based on the receiver. In general, receivers like to take 5 volts. There's some that take 9 volts. There's some that can take 12 volts even. But in general, 5 volts is a good, safe voltage. And so this power goes directly into the ESC in the bottom, but also goes through a 5 volt step down to get to the receiver. Once it's in the receiver, it outputs both the power and the signal to the servos, which only need 5 volts to work really well because they're not doing a huge amount of work. They're only moving these flaps while the ESC is powering the motor, which actually propels the plane. So I hope you guys learned something useful from that video, and I hope it's encouraged you to at least try out making a kit plane. They're great fun to fly, great way to either annoy your neighbors or not get in trouble with the FAA. What am I talking about? But either way, it's great fun, and I hope you guys try it.